So in reality, what has happened is that the major brands have neglected building that sense of community and that sense of brand loyalty. And I think further, the fact that some of the very big brands have done such deep discounting that not only have they destroyed part of the marketplace, they've also challenged their community and their community's loyalty to that particular brand. We're in a situation now where some of the smaller, more unique brands have a very strong audience, strong sense of community, and the community knows that there's a predictable outcome in terms of purchasing that particular product, as opposed to some of the bigger brands, predominantly bigger brands as well, that have gone out there, deep discounted, and they have alienated their original community because now something is half price or 60% off or 70% off, etc. And now they're looking elsewhere, or they're just price hunting, which means they've got no loyalty to anyone or anything. They're just going out there and choosing what the cheapest product in the market is.
Welcome to Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. In the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. You are listening to a limited series of recordings during Rouleur Live 2024. This limited series has 11 episodes, and in each episode, the guests are asked 4 key questions. Each of my guests has different insights into where the opportunities for success in the cycling industry lie. So make sure you to subscribe and follow so you'll get notified of new podcasts because they will be released in quick succession. In this episode, I speak with Sven Thiele, the former CEO and founder of Chile, which focused on staging and marketing high-quality cycling events around the world. He explores the importance of grassroots marketing, community loyalty, and evolving role of content creators. Now, back to the show.
Hi, my name is Sven Thiele. I'm the original founder of Hot Chili.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sven, for taking the time to speak with me. I wanted to go straight into the questions and ask you, where should cycling companies prioritize their spending when aiming to drive brand visibility and engagement?
Wow. Well, we're in an interesting market situation at the moment, which is very revealing in terms of what is useful and what is not useful for bicycle companies or just bike sector in general, where they should be spending. And I think the one thing that we've learned in the kind of current market conditions is that the bike market had enjoyed an amazing run, a real purple patch of where things were going in a good direction in any case. And therefore the return on people's spend was not necessarily validated. So you could have a big spend and maybe have a big ego and a big spend and feel that it was doing very, very well. And then you still land up in the situation post-COVID and post the big market peak where you realize you could spend that amount of money and nobody's buying, right? So there's the real acid test. So I think where bike organizations should be spending, bicycle or bike industry organizations should be spending their money is flip the model a little bit, which a lot of brands are doing, which is don't start at the Tour de France and work downwards, start at the grassroots and work upwards. Because the biggest problem that we've found in the marketplace is that people were chasing those what were perceived as high value, high return transactions or spends, which in reality neglected what was happening at the grassroots level and getting newcomers into the market and into the sport. Whereas if they had been doing that now, those people would still be there and they would be today's client and today's customer.
That's a good point because you have to educate that target audience and so that they can come with you along the journey of from product to product to iteration to iteration.
Correct. And in terms of their lifetime value to the sport. So as a consumer, so in reality, what has happened is that the major brands have neglected building that sense of community and that sense of brand loyalty. And I think further, the fact that some of the very big brands have done such deep discounting that not only have they destroyed part of the marketplace, they've also challenged their community and their community's loyalty to that particular brand. We're in a situation now where some of the smaller, more unique brands have a very strong audience, strong sense of community, and the community knows that there's a predictable outcome in terms of purchasing that particular product, as opposed to some of the bigger brands, predominantly bigger brands as well, that have gone out there, deep discounted, and they have alienated their original community because now something is half price or 60% off or 70% off, etc.
Yeah.
And now they're looking elsewhere, or they're just price hunting, which means they've got no loyalty to anyone or anything. They're just going out there and choosing what the cheapest product in the market is.
You mentioned community. You mentioned small brands having a closer connection to those communities that they nurtured and built. And I think that's in part to the content creators. And we have seen the rise of content creator economy transforming the traditional cycling sponsorship model. How do you think, in your opinion, brands are transforming and adapting to the new sponsorship model that involves tapping into the content creator?
It's a great question, because one could probably run a kind of a discussion session for several hours just on this topic. But again, the current market situation has really revealed, to my earlier point, which is how bad some of the marketing dollars that were being spent, how bad it actually was. And there were some niche content creators who have been bashing the door down. You being one of the early pioneers in this particular space, where the bigger brands were generally going out there and saying, listen, if we were going to spend this amount of money, then we're going to have a TV advert, we're going to have a magazine advert, et cetera, et cetera. The market has been turned upside down a little bit, which is we as a consumer, we are going out there and we have devalued the value of a double page spread in a magazine or a TV advert, because immediately one knows it's just, you're part of a monetization economy. Whereas if you were going out there and you were riding with a bunch of mates and it was 10 of you in the middle of winter and one of you is riding with a jacket and they're the warmest out of all of you, you say, what jacket are you wearing? Type of thing. And it's that type of feedback loop which is becoming more and more important. And I mean, I was in a presentation this morning where we were talking about the little red book in China, which is, the social media platform, which is ultimately a bunch of individuals that are content creators talking about the value of a product to other consumers. Right. And the point being is it's not an overtly monetized model like the normal advertising or the normal marketing model. So content creators who remain genuine and authentic will, in value, become more and more and more valuable. And the other thing that I think is really important from the content creator's perspective, because the first thing that happens when you talk to a brand as a content creator is they'll go, well, how many followers have you got? Or how many of this have you got? And you kind of go, well, is that actually the right question?
The right metrics.
Yeah, it's I can go to, say I've got 10,000 people, but how many will be valuable to me and my brand, and how many people would believe that as being authentic? And so if they said to you, how many women under the age of 35 in your community who love riding gravel or something like that, and you kind of go, oh, well, we've got 450 people in the southeast of England. You go, that's really valuable, right? Never mind the 10,000. And I think this is a part where the relationship is an emerging relationship where the brands are understanding better what the communities and what the consumer is wanting and needing. And the mediator between that is the independent content creator. And I say independent because I think as a content creator, one needs to be continually honest with the audience that you're dealing with and saying, this is a paid for interview. And as people understand that, and they say, you can still have your own opinion and say, listen, I think, how do you compare your product to product X? And you say, well, I prefer this to that, or whatever the case may be. It might still be a paid for piece of content, but the point of it being is you're being authentic to your community and your audience. So I think that is one of the key aspects for success.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I wanted to focus on, you touched upon slightly on the tailwinds and the headwinds that we as a cycling industry are facing. Where do you think the few key points, maybe one or two, that the tailwinds and the headwinds that we're currently facing?
It's an interesting question. I think we're all wrestling with that particular question at the moment, the tailwinds. Let's talk about the positive. So in terms of tailwind, I think the great thing is, as painful as it is, what we're going through, is it means that we have to reset and recreate ourselves. Control, Alt, Delete, let's start. We're not starting from scratch, but we have the opportunity to to reset the way that we do things. And I see that as a tailwind, because what it means is that the smaller entrepreneur business, boutique brand, etc., can be very, very agile because the demands are changing so quickly, and the reality, or let's say one's understanding of reality, is changing so quickly. The smaller brands can be more agile in the way that they're doing it. So for the smaller brands, I see that as a tailwind. I see also that there's a tailwind for new business and new opportunity, because the minute you start a business, you end up getting further and further behind the curve, because the kind of the pioneering frontier is continually moving, right?
Yeah.
And you're having to continually deliver to an audience, which is your existing audience. So, and other people are chasing the new audience. What we have now is we have the new micro communities, and the new audiences are there, waiting to be fed with new products, new capabilities, and new services. So if you set up a new business in these market conditions, you have, I feel, a good chance of success. So I see that as a following wind. The headwind side that we're talking about is that because we had this massive peak, the COVID peak that we're also aware of, and we're now, generally say 50% off that particular peak, depending on what product you're in or what geography you're in. You are in a state where the big brands who were responsible for most of the turnover and most of the market size are struggling to work out what to do and where to go, because their business model doesn't allow for them to be such a dramatic drop in revenue, right? So what we're dealing with as a headwind in general is the fact that when these big brands make a decision, they affect the rest of the market. You have, unintended consequences as a result of what they are doing. So they might be cutting their nose to spite their face, maybe not overtly, but they might be doing that. But it's cutting everybody else's nose as well. So think of some of the bike price drops and things like that, or some of the clothing price drops and things like that. A genuine brand that is out there working hard and delivering a quality product that's not reducing its price is continually being compared to somebody else, which is a brand which has got a price disparity. So I think there is that headwind that we're dealing with, the kind of the overflow noise, and we're dealing with the second point would be a generally undercapitalized market in terms of funding. So, we're landing up in situations where most businesses have a balance sheet which is probably showing the stresses and the strains of the last 5 years, and therefore the ability to invest is very, very challenging.
Yeah, it's low. Very good. So I wanted now to kind of take it into a more personal side.
Yes.
And ask you, you have led Hot Chili for a number of years.
Yes.
And looking back at that experience and at present moment as well, what is one thing that you do every day that enables you to perform at your best?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So if I think of those 20 Hot Chili years, which were really good fun and what have you, but also extremely hard work, and the events industry is very intensive and generally high stress, I would say there's probably two things, and I'm going to add a third one. So the one thing that I've been doing since the mid-80s is meditations. And that's been a great way to kind of start your day and separate you from some of the challenges and stresses and things like that. And I think particularly as an entrepreneur over the last several years, that's been really important. I think getting on your bike is definitely an ability to go out there and clear your head. But I'd add a third one, and I used to run a lot in my teenage and early 20s, and I've just started running again now.
Okay.
And what I'm seeing also with other people in maybe entrepreneurs and things like that who become a time crunch is, can I afford 4 hours on my bicycle, or can I do a half hour or 45-minute run? So I'm definitely feeling a move from the kind of the long endurance rides to a half hour run, 45-minute run. And I think that's going to be interesting to see the effect of that in the market.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, because as a new parent, time is gold. So you really need to maximize your outings. I wanted now, as part of the podcast, I started a tradition. Every guest that comes on the podcast leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. So the question that was left for you is the following. In the season of the racing season, the women's side, has there been for you a moment in the racing calendar that stood out as a great moment for women's cycling?
Yeah, there's one which is quite an emotional, Zoe Backstead. So when she became junior world champion, so Zoe, so obviously daughter of Magnus and sister to Eleanor. So Magnus Backstead was very much involved with what we did with young development riders in Africa. And we had a really successful program around that, particularly with Nick Lamini and people like that. But the brilliant thing is that Zoe, as a 13-year-old, came along to some of our events, were predominantly male. And as a young 13-year-old on a junior block was beating everyone else, male, female, whatever it is. What I really got from her was the level of passion that she had for cycling and particularly racing. You know, I think she was racing to train. She wasn't training to race, if you know what I mean. So, and then having watched that particular journey, obviously having seen how the inequality of women's cycling to male, well, in many sports, but with respect to male cycling, things like that, to see her go through, you know, from a 13-year-old to where she is now, and then her first junior world champions jersey was extremely emotional. And I think that helped from my sense with the community that I'm familiar with. You know, that was a massive data point, a relevant data point in terms of understanding the journey, female cycling, women's racing, which more recently I think has been more exciting than men's racing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that. So thank you for sharing your insights. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm sure I'll have to get you to do another podcast.
I'll happily do that with you. So sorry, It's been such a, you know, I know we were trying to do this about 6 months ago.
Yes, but that's okay. That's okay. I wanted to ask if you want to leave a question to my next guest.
Yeah. So I would say, because you're obviously dealing mainly with people in the cycling industry. Yeah. So I think what would be very interesting if you ask somebody, bearing in mind what the industry's been through, you know, this massive build up, COVID, post-COVID, peak drop, whether the individual would do everything again that they did, or do they believe in everything that they did from pre-COVID to now? What's different?
What's different? That's very good. That's a brilliant question. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much indeed.
Thank you for listening to this quick interview. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopes. You can find me under my own name on LinkedIn. You can find Ride to Success on all socials. And let me know if you like this format of shorter, snappier interviews with guests within the cycling industry. And if you like the show, please give us a review, follow, helps us to create better content and bring more guests to the podcast. Make sure you tune in to the next episode, which will be released shortly. Thank you for listening.